Hi, everybody. My name's Chris. And Al, what time is it?
Hey, I'm here. And you know what, Chris? It is time for another Readiness Rewired podcast, which we're way overdue, buddy. So I'm glad we're doing this.
Yeah, I think we've got a kind of an interesting, very timely topic and a couple of people that can really help us explore this. Mike, I think you've been on a recent adventure, and maybe you can fill us in a little bit about um, your new pilot's license.
Well, really, not so much about that, but I think one of the things people will gather from just watching the news, you watch news, checking reports and stuff like this day and age, it seems like the word drone sure pops up everywhere, right? I mean, drone this, drone that. There's a war going on. Drones have revolutionized and changed warfare immeasurably over the last few years, very handful of years. But drones in our society in general have really escalated. And it got to the point where, the government, our Federal Aviation's Administration, had to really make some significant changes in the laws over about the last 10 years or so because this thing's blowing up, right? Drones are coming out of the woodwork and people use them for all kinds of different reasons. Certainly, you got the recreational flyers, which that's what I was. I started back in 2014, 2015, just recreationally flying unmanned aerial vehicles. They were called UAVs back then. Now they're called unmanned aerial systems, UAS. But drones, RC radio controlled airplanes were around forever, but then the quadcopter came in, and now quadcopters with four propellers, if you will, rotors, they're now called drones. And so drones can be winged, drones can be rotor winged, multi rotor winged. They can have more than four rotors, they can have six, they can have eight. I mean, and their capacity and the technology has changed so much over the last 10 years that it comes as no surprise to everybody, I think, that they're becoming more and more prevalent throughout society and being used more and more by so many different industries. Um, so even though they've been around for a while, and I'm an old guy, I've been flying them for about 10 years or so. Um, Really, we're just now even starting to scratch the surface because of the technology advancements just over the last, handful of years. So it's a timely topic to bring up just because if you talk about emergency management, disaster response, search and rescue, recovery, anything like that. And so I think that's really the reason we're talking about it today, right? And how is it getting into our old industry, emergency management? And what should people know about it? Does that make sense?
Yeah, that's really interesting, Mike. And I think it also makes sense for us to bring in somebody else that might have some insights into what's going on in the industry. So I think Dave is going to join us. Um,
Hey guys, how's it going?
Dave, yeah, Dave, tell us about kind of drones in the industry, both in public safety and maybe in emergency management.
Yeah, well, Mike kind of hit it. Iowa in general started looking at after a lot of other states did back in 2018. I was president of the state association at that time, and drones were an up and coming thing throughout public safety and emergency management throughout the U.S. And Iowa was pretty early to catch on. The state Homeland Security emergency management director at the time was very interested in it, and I was the president of the association at the time, and so we started utilizing some funding for the classes and the equipment, and there were parameters, of course, on what could and couldn't be purchased and what you could and couldn't do. And as Mike indicated, it's an evolving process. It changes constantly with FAA regulations and agency regulations and local regulations, and like anything else in the public sector, it becomes a heavily regulated industry, and rightly so. I mean, the SUASs, the small unmanned aerial systems that we're allowed to fly are, up to 55 pounds. And you think, oh, no big deal, 55 pounds, right? Well, 55 pounds falling from 400 foot in the sky is going to hurt and do some injuries. So, it has to be regulated, and 400 foot up, you could wind up close to a heliport or, interfering with other rotary, fixed wing, or other types of operations. So, though most people think, oh, You regulate it. You can't fly more than 400 foot above ground level. They want you to have a Part 107 FAA pilot's license for it. You have to sit for a test. Otherwise, you have to do a COA, conditional authorization agreement, and be a COA waived program. I mean, all these have regulations, and no matter how you slice it, you still have to fly within those regulations, and you still have to report to the FAA and, be insured and all those things. But it really has revolutionized public safety in general, and you're going to continue to see that. So it's an interesting topic.
Well, it really is. And I think to kind of carry on more, the public's perception of these things and their uses, I think sometimes gets skewed and twisted in such a way where, bottom line, it's like anything else. Can it be abused? Can it be done in such a way where it could potentially, be harmful to people, embarrassing to people, or whatever? I mean, I think the first thing I used to hear where I was flying, I was a recreational flyer before, and you don't need a license to fly recreationally, but you do need to have some training. It's called the trust certificate, where you basically take an online course that's sponsored and approved by the FAA, number of different sources to do it. And it teaches you some basic rules, some basic laws, and the do's and don'ts, and that kind of stuff. And so the average recreational person who has an interest in drones can fly a drone, right? Under these auspices, but there has to be, like you say, boundaries and limits. And it's because the public gets nervous when they see drones up in the air a lot of times. And the first thing I get, I remember I was talking to Al here about it a while back, and first thing I posted about it or something, he goes, "Yeah, Mike, probably flying around looking in people's bathrooms and shit." It's like, no, I don't do that. Can people abuse anything like telescopes or binoculars? And could a drone with a camera be abused? Yes, it could. There's laws against that. You aren't supposed to do that stuff. You get caught doing it, you're going to get busted. And bottom line is, when it's being used for the public good, that's a whole different animal, right? Now, when it's being used by the public good, like Dave said, there's a lot of laws and regulations that have to be followed. And so, because a public entity, law enforcement, emergency management, a fire service, rescue group, lifeguards, or whatever, somebody chooses to add that capability to their service to the public, it isn't likely going to be for any kind of nefarious or whatever purpose. It's meant to enhance their mission capability. Wouldn't that be the way to describe it, Dave?
Yeah, no, you're exactly right. I mean, I go back to, people get weird perceptions about everything. So I think Mike said it best, anything can be abused. Well, okay, we've had automobiles around for how long? A long, long time, right? And automobiles, when you used to think of an automobile crash into a building or into a crowd, you almost always went to, oh, they had a medical condition, or they had Alzheimer's, dementia, got confused. It was never anything nefarious. Well, now, flash forward in the 20th century, we're in 2026, and we protect against intentional criminal activity, whether it's domestic terrorists or just general criminal activity for people ramming their vehicles into soft targets. And so I don't care if you've got a knife or you've got a car or you've got a drone. If people want to make that into a weaponized device or use it for nefarious purposes, they certainly can. If there's a will, there's a way, as they say. There's a way to do that. But the public sector is typically made up of people that want to help people. And you get in this business because you want to do the right thing, you want to help people. Now, I don't care what industry you're in, there's 1% in your industry, no matter what industry you work in, that don't do a good job, sometimes bend the rules. And that's why you have agency oversight. That's why you have rules and regulations. And when that comes to light, that somebody's using a tool that they're provided in the public trust for things that are outside the policies and procedures, that's when we, try and root that out and fix the problem. So at the end of the day, anything can be used for both good purposes and bad purposes. It's who are you going to trust, right? And the reason we want to use them in public safety is to help people. I mean, you're seeing programs like Drone as a First Responder roll out in, places here in Iowa. Tulsa, Oklahoma's got an extensive one. Oklahoma City's got an extensive one. Louisville, Kentucky. There's a number of metropolitan areas throughout the country that have Drone as a First Responder, where they're working drones in a real-time crime center. And, if they get a car crash on the interstate, while they're dispatching equipment, they're flying a drone from a launch site directly to get eyes on, so they can determine, if that's a major incident and everybody needs to continue to run hot, or if they've pulled the vehicle off the road and everybody can slow down. We just need 1 or 2 officers to go handle this. Same way with fires. How big is the fire? You're going to get a lot of different 911 calls, but until you actually lay eyes on, you can stream that video back to somebody that's got expertise in interpreting what they're seeing. You're sending a lot of emergency resources, putting a lot of people at risk. So Drone as a First Responder is a great thing. It can do everything from take out a stop the bleed kit and drop it to somebody, to fly a small AED out to an area and drop it, to, EpiPens and Narcan, and I mean, you name it. They even make Lost Hunter packs, which have like a 2-way GMRS radio that's got flat and long on it. It's got, a couple granola bars, a small bottle of water, and a thermal blanket, like a emergency silver emergency blanket. And you can drop them to a stranded hunter, that you're trying to get somebody to, or a hillside climber. So there's a ton of things you can do. It's pretty much endless. It's really limited on the capacity of the drone and the payload it's able to carry. Our limitation on our SUASs is, the drone itself can't weigh more than 55 pounds, and you have to factor in the package that you're carrying as well. So obviously the drones, if they're carrying an AED, it can only be a few AEDs because there's only a couple light enough for it to carry. But it's pretty much endless, and it can be used for a lot of good, positive things, and you're seeing that. Everything from surveillance on a person that stood off, and you're otherwise going to have to put law enforcement in there with a weapon, or a dog in there with a weapon, put them in a vulnerable situation where you could just fly a drone in to that building or through that broken window, or to a number of areas, and say, okay, here's what's going on real time. The guy does or does not have a gun. The person is or is not alive. There is or is not an explosive device rigged to that door. And, you're decreasing the risk to the responders as well, and the person that's vulnerable, because a lot of times you just need to establish communication. I mean, we think about drones as the ones that fly, but we have drones that are bomb robots, drones that are, just used for carrying a package inside, whether it's a radiation monitor or a chemical monitor. So drones are really an endless use, and they're made to help public safety do their job safer, more efficiently, and with less risk to the public. Am I going to say things can't be abused? Everything can be abused. I don't care what it is. In the wrong hands, without the right policies, everything from a spoon to a car to a knife to a drone can be abused. Let's not BS each other. But for the purposes of what public safety typically does, and the way we're regulated, and the amount of oversight that we have, I think they're a game changer, and they're going to continue to be a game changer.
Just to put some,
and that's why.
Go ahead, Al.
I was going to say, Mike. I was going to say that's why I liked when we talked about this and talked about, hey, let's do a podcast on drones. And Mike, you were getting your license, and we know Dave from working with him that we're a little more connected, being in emergency preparedness, and Dave being in emergency management, and talking about law enforcement and fire. But a lot of the general public don't understand all the good public safety things, all the emergency preparedness and response things that the drones are used for. They don't even give that a thought, which is why I was really excited about this drone podcast, because you think of, your grandmother wandering out of the nursing home at 3 a.m. Well, the drone that has night vision can find her, and does and has found her.
Yeah.
And Dave, you mentioned about, the drone flying through the broken window.
Yep.
Guess what? In the new county I live in, it doesn't have to be a broken window, because they have a drone that will fly through and break the window. And
Correct.
I know that for a fact because I've seen it and talked, so,
Correct.
but that's the exciting thing about, bringing this to the general public and to our Readiness Rewired followers that can get the message out, is that there's a lot of good. And I agree with you. Yeah, anybody can do bad things, but there's a lot of good. And that's what we need to focus on with using. Yeah, Mike, the little one there.
Let's get some perspective real quick about what Dave's talking about. They can be this small, right?
Yeah,
This one
correct.
weighs less than 249 grams. All right.
Mm-hmm.
249 grams is kind of the cutoff weight. Somebody can go buy a drone recreationally, fly something like this around. You don't need it licensed. You don't need a license. You just need a little bit of training, this trust certificate that you've gotten the safety regulation training, and you can fly this thing. It doesn't have to be FAA registered. You don't have to have any special credential other than this trust certificate. And as long as you're a good citizen, you follow the rules, you're not going to get in trouble, and you're not going to cause any problems with something like this as long as you use it for the reason you're using it. Little small ones like this, maybe a little bit bigger, Dave's talking about, you can send into a room. Now they have what are called
Correct.
FPV goggles. You put goggles on and you see exactly what this drone's camera is looking at. That can be first person view flown into a room, a building or whatever, and you're recording and live seeing everything. And that's what Dave was talking about with being able to go check out a scene without sending a human or an animal in there and risking those people's lives for observation purposes only. These things can be equipped with other packages too, a little bit bigger ones. You can put in like tear gas pepper spray, pepper balls, and a pepper fog. I saw a video on putting like, maybe 3 of these in a kit in a school. And if you get an active shooter, active threat situation, these things are deployed within something like 15 seconds. They can go find the perpetrator, and it's enough to attract their attention, distract them. You can fly these into them to actually disturb them, and they can actually deploy pepper ball powder and disable them, or at least get them distracted and get time for law enforcement to show up. I mean, so something this small can be useful in Dave's purposes.
Correct.
That's that new yellow canary, right?
Yep, exactly correct. There are programs throughout the U.S. right now that utilize school resource officers, and there was one I read about here recently in the last 30 days that's exactly what they're doing. They were enhancing their SRO program at the school to have 1 or 2 drones in there with AI and gunshot detection. So if they detected the noise of a gunshot, it would ask the officer, do you want to deploy the drone? It would deploy the drone from a fixed location within the school, mapped out the school, and would fly directly there because it already knew the terrain in the school and how to get through there. Are there places they would have to go open a door? Yeah, potentially. But it served exactly that purpose. It could get there quicker than the SRO in some of these larger school buildings, could distract them, could provide real-time video feeds back to either responding officers, the SRO, or the front office. So you're seeing a lot more of that. And the first-person viewer ones, yeah, they can be glass breakers, you name it. There's endless ways that they're used presently, and the success stories are commonly not told because, people take such a dim view of Big Brother and take such a dim view of, the government and public safety doing anything that's autonomous or drone related or AI related. I mean, you're seeing such pushback on that people are afraid to talk about it because the perception is, well, the government's just using it to surveil me. Well, I'm going to tell you, on my way to or from work every day, I probably pass no less than 100 cameras, and those are owned by different agencies, and they're everything from doorbell cams on houses to, traffic control cameras to you name it, to people's cameras in their cars. And that video, you're in the public domain. That video can be used for anything, for good intent or bad intent. So why would you not want a public safety agency that has rules and regulations and is regulating that to be able to utilize those tools to help solve crimes, find missing persons, and solve problems? Because that's regulated and it's provided with oversight. You don't know that the neighbor who just put up the camera on his house isn't looking in your windows with that camera because I'm going to tell you, a lot of these home camera systems, they're pretty good.
They
and you
are.
can definitely see into your neighbor's windows with them.
Yeah.
And there's no regulation on that. So I'm much more comfortable with the government and the public safety agencies using this for good, because I know they've got parameters, they've got oversight, than I am with just any old schmo doing it.
This is the kind of drone Dave's talking about for infrared or actually
Correct.
thermal imaging, something more this size that he can put up and other
Correct.
agencies can put up and find people at night. Uh,
Correct.
Lost people, lost children, Alzheimer's patients, whatever. You take a bunch of these things out there and they're enterprise level. They're this professional gear,
Correct.
right? But this kind of stuff, a little bit bigger, has got more capability than those little things we talked about. And so this is a very useful and portable size for law enforcement and emergency management.
And let's be honest, Iowa's weather's pretty unpredictable. So you want enterprise level stuff that's rated for flying in higher wind endurance, colder temperatures, rain and mist. I mean, some of these that are operated by programs can fly in, winds up to 30, 40 mile per hour gusts, fly in negative 14-degree air temperature, and can fly in rain or IP65 certified. But, not all of them are. And you have to know the endurance, because, the battery capacity and the endurance of the drone, whether it's, fighting the wind, fighting the cold, or fighting the mist, can be defeating to those drones. And the last thing you want them doing is falling out of the sky. And a lot of them, that we're flying in public safety throughout the U.S., when they're flying in any proximity near, then they're doing a Class 2 drone, which means that drone's equipped with a parachute that automatically deploys. If it descends too quickly, there's a sensor in it that says, you're descending too quickly. I can't tell if this is a controlled descent or not. It sure feels like it's not. And the drone autonomously deploys a parachute so that it doesn't land with, an up to 55-pound object falling from it, 400 foot and hitting you in the head. I'd much rather have a parachute on it that auto deployed and fell. And so that's a Class 2 drone when it's carrying that chute. And those are being more and more commonly used in public safety, especially around arena events where you have outdoor venues, whether they're baseball stadiums, football stadiums, soccer stadiums. We got FIFA coming. I can guarantee you they're being used around all those FIFA games by both good actors and bad actors and some recreational people. And sometimes it's people that just want to get a different perspective and they're flying and they don't realize they're flying in restricted airspace. But they're soon to find out, because those areas commonly have drone detection. And those are often run by public safety agencies as well to detect drones. And so they will send somebody out. And now they're starting to venture into the form of how do we defend against that and defeat unauthorized drones in certain restricted areas, whether it's flying over a prison or a jail and dropping contraband to an inmate. There has to be a way to defeat it, not just detect it. And then you have to go find the pilot and or the drone, but you sometimes can't do that. So how do I put this drone down safely that's going to carry a weapon into a open air prison courtyard to drop onto an inmate? That's actually become an industry where they hire other criminals to fly drones and travel around the U.S. and drop contraband in prisons, and that's a job now.
Well,
So,
that's a bigger drone. That would be a drone like this. So this is a bigger like drone. Now these would have
some of them are the smaller ones, Mike. They're just flying out knives and weed and
yeah,
vape cartridges, but some of them are bigger ones like that.
yeah. I mean,
Jeez.
this will fly probably 5 pounds, maybe 6 pounds. Dave's got some, bigger ones that could fly, like you say, an AED or a rescue package
Yep.
out to somebody lost. There's all kinds of them out there,
Correct.
and people just need to understand that law enforcement, rescue, and emergency management, public safety uses of these are not to be feared, really.
Correct. And they're used
So,
for, everything from damage assessments after a tornado. You're trying to figure out what's the scope and impact of a tornado. And well, one of the easiest ways to do that in the past was you would go and get on a fixed wing airplane or get on a helicopter. Well, those are very expensive to do, and typically you take Civil Air Patrol, or you have to charter something. Very costly to do aerial reconnaissance after a tornado. Quick and easy and very efficient to do with a drone. You put a drone up, fly the path of the tornado, and you can quickly transmit back how wide it was, how far it reached. Did it hit an LP tank? Did it hit some ag chemicals and cause a spill in an area that you don't realize? And okay, well, how bad's that spill? So we'll fly a detector out there. You think nuclear power plants, would you rather put a drone out there with a radiation detector or a person? Well, I can tell you, I'd rather send the drone downrange with a radiation detector than that person any day of the week.
So how do you guys how does somebody get started? Say a community or community member out there somewhere that's like, hey, this sounds like it's a promising technology, and they're in one part of public safety or they're in a school. How would you recommend them going forward with one, learning about it, then two, maybe developing
Well, that's a good one, Chris.
some?
So, when we started pushing this out statewide in Iowa, we told people that you're going to have to go back and build, local support for the program. And so you're going to have to go back and talk to your policymakers, whether that's your agency administrators or your elected officials or whoever you report to, and get buy-in from them. So there's collaboration on it. Then you're going to have to, investigate what other programs are using for their equipment so you don't waste your money buying something that just is ineffective for what you're wanting to do. And then just, grab other people's copies of their SOPs and policies and get your county attorney involved or your city attorney involved or your state attorney involved, and they can look at the local, state, and federal regulations. Airspace in the U.S. is controlled by the FAA. You can't trump the FAA. I mean, there's commonly this confusion about, well, we don't have to pay attention to the federal government. Yes, you do. We fought a little civil war over that. Superseding laws by the FAA supersede everything else. So they control the airspace. So where can I fly? Where can't I fly? How do I look up a LANC? How do I file a notice to airmen? How do I do a temporary flight restriction or an exemption from a temporary flight restriction? And then how do I train my pilots and what equipment do I buy? And then the funding source. So, I mean, it's a multifaceted thing. And when we developed these programs throughout Iowa, a lot of them used funding from, pipeline industry, racing and gaming, casinos, local, not-for-profit organizations that funded them. And some of them used budgetary money. Some of them used federal grant money for training, but drones weren't allowed at the time. That was a big no-no. So, you've got to figure out multiple layers to this problem. And like anything with emergency management, emergency preparedness, it's complexity. And so it's not just, hey, I want to go buy a drone and I'm going to put it up in the air tomorrow and we're going to go do this. No, it usually takes months, if not a year, to set up a program and then to have buy-in and really, make it worth its time and money, because they're not cheap to buy. They do cost money to provide insurance, provide training. Even if you go the COA waiver, where not everyone is a Part 107 certified pilot, and you just have a couple that are, there's still training that's required. So, there's ongoing training, there's battery maintenance. It's not uncommon for batteries to swell and to have to be replaced. And it's not uncommon for drones to impact things that they can't see. I mean, nighttime flights are kind of the pitfall of drones. Even though they're flying with thermal cameras, a lot of their avoidance detection is built around ambient light. So if they don't see the tree or the wire, they can fly into it. So, you have to understand that you have a pilot in command of the drone and you have a spotter. They both got to be trained. You have to have the right equipment. You have to have the right insurance. You have to have political buy-in, policies, procedures, and training, and you have to know where you're flying, because things can happen. I mean, you can have flyaway drones that inadvertently fly into a microwave path, and it disrupts the communication from the controller to the drone, and now you've got a flyaway. And so, what's that drone programmed out of the factory to do when it flies away? Is it programmed to sit down once it loses communication, or is it programmed to return to its last known good? So you have to understand all those things. So it's not an easy question to answer. And I can tell you, when we've been involved with helping people set up programs throughout the state of Iowa, we take lessons learned from other cities, states, counties, federal organizations, et cetera.
Wow, lots of good information. Hey, let's go around and see if you have any other last questions, and then maybe we can have Mike wind up with giving people an email that they can address if they have further questions and all. Al, you got anything else?
Well, I do. Dave, you mentioned a lot of good information about, what the drones can do and everything, but you also have community volunteers that help because it takes a lot of people in order to get that program effective at 3 in the morning on a Saturday evening, that time on a holiday type of thing. And
Correct.
this is something that the general community can reach out to their EMAs or reach out to the people in charge of the drones, if you will, and
Correct.
become an active person. Is that correct? And how do they do that?
Yeah, and everybody organizes their programs differently. I mean, we've seen them where they're entirely grassroots and they're just they own the program, they own the equipment, they insure the pilots, but the pilots provide their own licensing and their own equipment, and they're flying under a memorandum of understanding or an agreement, legally drawn up usually, and they will fly on behalf of somebody. To do that, typically you need to be a Part 107 pilot. It's different if they're coming from an agency where it's part of their employee, then they can be a COA pilot. They can fly as part of their job duties as long as they have the appropriate training, insurance, and regulations. So every agency that I know of sets up their programs a little bit different. Some utilize only career members, some are a cross pollination of volunteers and community members. So you just have to check with your local organization, see how that's set up. I can tell you typically most programs in most metropolitan areas have someone on duty in their county that's a drone pilot pretty much 24/7 if they've got a drone program. And it's much like using the K9s. Typically the dispatch center says, okay, XYZ has a drone request for, say it's a missing Alzheimer's patient that walked away from a nursing home at 2 or 3 in the morning. We're going to send that drone pilot out, and that drone pilot now is committed to that call. Great. He can only fly for a certain length of time until all of his batteries are expended. If he can't recover that person, then they might activate the volunteers or the other members. And so how does that look? Some counties utilize a mass messaging tool. Others have a phone tree. So it just really varies what county you're in, how it's structured, and how they're notifying them. But most counties have, and most drone programs that I know of throughout the state have like a multitude of pilots from all different aspects of life, but they all have to follow the same rules and regulations, and they all have to be insured. And typically they'll all train together at least once a month and go out and fly, and they have to provide their training records as well. So it's not a one size fits all, and it really depends on who the agency having jurisdiction over the program is and how they've designed it. But yeah, you do see volunteers, and you'll also see where some places don't have one, and so they'll have to contract in. I know several counties that don't have their own drone program, and they'll go out and contract with a private company to come in and do damage surveying or help. But then you're getting into a different type of relationship because now they're a commercial pilot flying commercially for cost, and so there's different regulations for that as well.
So a quick question, Dave. How many out of the
Sure.
99 counties in Iowa, what would your guess be of how many of them actually have their own resident drone program?
I can tell you that at least half the counties in Iowa have a drone program within their county, whether
Okay.
that's a countywide program or a city program. Out of 99 counties in Iowa, I'd say easily 50% of them have a drone for public safety use somewhere within their county. And some of them are one agency, and it might be a volunteer fire department that got it through pipeline funding, and they've only got 2 or 3 pilots, and they go anywhere in the county that they're requested to, some of the more robust programs that have drone as a first responder, where they're automatically dispatching them to a call, and they're flying real time under different FAA regulations, and they're flying autonomously out to an incident, transmitting that video back. So, I mean, you see the entire spectrum depending on what county you're in Iowa on their programs.
Well, that's good to know. I think all the folks that watch us and are involved in healthcare emergency management should know about this kind of stuff. And so if you guys have more questions or need more information, use that readiness.rewired@gmail.com. Get a hold of us and we'll get some information to you. We've got experts like Dave and others we can get you in touch with if they're willing and try to get you some answers. And for you folks who just now have an interest in it, go check out faa.gov/UAS. faa.gov-UAS and see about all this stuff. You can start learning about what the rules are. If you have a recreational interest in it and want to get involved in it yourself, use our email. I'll give you some tips and tricks about, but go out to the FAA and you can start reading on how to get all involved in something like this if this really interests you.
And dronezone.com is another good one, Mike. And just remember, a fair amount of these drones have to be registered with the FAA, and it's a small fee. It's $5 for, if I recall correctly, it's 3 years. So you have to mark your drone. It has to have, stickers on it that say, what the registration number issued by the FAA is. And you register that, you pay $5. It's good for 3 years. They send you a reminder when it's coming up, and it helps recover your drone if, God forbid, it should fly away, but it also keeps you in compliance. And you're right, there's also mutual aid programs throughout the state where they have, teams that'll come out, whether it's a team of 1 or 2 guys to a team of 12 guys that'll come out. If your county doesn't have drones and needs it for a search or whatever the anomaly is, you can usually reach out through your emergency manager. They can request it through the state duty officer, and a mutual aid team can come into your county. If you're unfortunate enough to be a county that does not have a drone program, there's mutual aid resources as well.
I was just going to say thanks everybody for all your insights. This is a much bigger topic than most people's probable casual familiarity with it. You guys have lent a lot of insight into it.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah, thanks for having us.
For joining us.
Dave, appreciate your time and your expertise.
Absolutely.
Have a good one.